Welcome to my action research project. We'll look at the essential questions first, and then I'll describe the study and the subjects that were part of the study. And then I'll go through some samples during each phase of the research process. And then at the end, we'll answer the essential questions based on the research that was conducted. The essential questions for the research: what are the benefits for providing online discussions as daily assessments of what students are comprehending and connecting with regards to the selected novel being read in class? The second question we're going to look at: what are the drawbacks that are brought up conducting discussions online rather than during class? Third, we're going to compare to previous years how students demonstrate high-order thinking skills with relation to their comprehension by participating in online independent discussions rather than a teacher-led classroom discussion. And finally, the fourth thing we're going to look at is how do the third and fourth grade students compare in their overall interactions and quality of discussions throughout the process. Here's a description of the study and the subjects involved. The third grade students will be reading the novel Sarah Plain and Tall, while the fourth grade students will be reading the novel Shiloh. Both novels are part of the curriculum every single year for these students, and in the past they have only had discussions that were teacher-led. Sometimes they would write responses on worksheets or other questions that came along with the book and online resources. But this time, the study is really going to focus on high-order thinking skills, really connecting to the literature and connecting to each other's discussion and insights. And hopefully, as we get through the different processes of this research study, you will see the development of their understanding of what I'm expecting out of their posts. In the first phase, the grade 3 students reading Sarah Plain and Tall responded to their discussion question pretty well. I felt that their responses to each other were okay. They could be a lot more thought-provoking, and really asking questions of each other would have been nice. But again, the first phase had very little teacher interaction and leadership, in that I wanted to see what the students could come up with on their own without any prompting. And again, I was very happy with some of their responses, and here's a small sample of some of them here and some interaction and responses to their initial posts. Here are some discussion responses to the Phase 1 portion of the research process for grade 4. The students did an okay job of responding to the question that was posed to them about the story Shiloh in the beginning of the book. We did have some students that asked a couple questions of each other. Overall, I wasn't as impressed with my fourth graders' take on the beginning of the book as I was with my third graders on the beginning of their book. I thought that the third graders had a lot more feeling and personal connection to what they were reading. I feel that the fourth grade responses were a little shallow, in that they really didn't put a whole lot of personal thought and connection into what they were reading. And here's just a couple samples of some of the initial posts from my fourth grade students in Phase 1 with little teacher interaction. During Phase 2 of my research process, the third graders had to make some more personal connections to the story that they were reading, which was Sarah Plain and Tall. And the main character leaves home to go start a new life and try to live a new life with a new family in a strange place where they know no one or how life is lived there. So my students had to connect with this in how they would feel if they had to up and move home from home alone on their own,
And that's kind of a deep question, I think, for third graders to really reflect on. And I really think that they did an excellent job of making some great connections to the character and their own personal thought process on how they might feel in the same situation. I first started with this student's example because he has a hard time sometimes putting his ideas on paper. So I thought that his connection to Ireland, and even though he doesn't live in Ireland, he feels like it's home to him because he visits it so often. And I thought that this would be a really nice one to share to start off this section of student samples. Here's another sample of some of the third grade responses to an initial question. Again, here's where students are getting a little bit more interaction and feedback from myself. I did send some messages to the class and talk to them about explaining their selves a little bit more and also interacting with each other in a more purposeful way. Their posts are right here, and though they're not super long, they still give a very good response and very descriptive response, and they give really good reasons for their response. Here's another example of the third grade students' responses to some of the later questions in the book. I haven't shown much of an example of them interacting with each other, but they did do that very well. I'm focusing more with the third grade on their initial posts because I felt that they really did a great job connecting to the question, to the story, to the characters, and really giving me some personal connections that they could then take away from the book and really have a different meaning of the story and the characters than students have in the past. And it was more than just comprehending what was happening in the story and really understanding the feelings the characters had and the decisions that they made and why they may have decided or acted certain ways in the story. During phase 2 for grade 4, I really wanted to focus on their responses to each other. Their initial posts were okay. They were improving a little bit, but I was concerned about how little they were responding to each other. They were using a lot of one-word responses. I agree, good job, good point. But they weren't telling why they agreed or why they felt it was a good job. And they were really missing the point of offering feedback and encouraging each other to think beyond their initial post. So that was my focus in phase 2 after seeing their results. And you'll see that in phase 3, grade 4 is the only one that I focused on because we really needed to up the ante on trying to get them to respond to each other in more thoughtful and meaningful ways. In phase 3, again, like I mentioned, grade 4 was the only one that really had any part in phase 3. I developed a rubric to assess their ability to respond to the initial questions and to each other. As you can see, the rubric listed right here measures their personal response, the details that they're using in their responses as relation to the literature they're reading, their response to classmates and giving thoughtful feedback, and no more one-word responses, and as always, their grammar and sentence structure is very important. My first sample of some of the grade 4 responses in phase 3 of my research, I was very happy. The students continued to give me better responses initially, and as you can see, we're starting to get more than one-word responses to each other. I really liked Abby's point to Nicole's post that pointing out a story detail that Nicole seemed to overlook. And that was really the kind of interaction I was looking for from the students, to really think about what each other is writing and then responding to it and giving feedback and reasons for the feedback. Some more responses to one another. I liked that Jane was giving two sides. She couldn't pick a side in her response. And I really like how the students interacted back and forth with each other. Jane responded to Tess's response to Jane's response. So, and then Abby added an extra question at the bottom here. So again, there's a lot more give and take with each other, and they really started interacting more with each other and thinking about what they were writing rather than giving one-word responses. And I attribute this to the rubric implementation of the research process. Again, here is another student that, like in third grade, I mentioned a student that had a hard time putting their ideas on paper, or in this case, typing them into the computer. Max had a hard time coming up and relating to the details in the story, and he had a really good response here. And again, he couldn't agree or disagree. Excuse me. But he did end up coming out with a good response and explaining both sides for himself. And I still like that some of the students were asking him questions and giving him some honest feedback. So now we come to answering the essential questions. I felt that the benefits for providing online discussions as daily assessments was a way to measure how the students could think outside the box and move to a new level of understanding of the literature they were reading beyond the story elements, beyond just the character and the plot. More thinking about why the characters acted or thought certain ways and really connecting with the characters and the events and the stories. Some of the drawbacks that I felt came about conducting discussions online rather than during class is that interaction between the teacher and the student, that when I'm leading a discussion, if they're not giving me the responses that I'm looking for, I can then prompt them further. Whereas online, if they don't see my response to them, they just leave their discussion post as is. So it lacks a little bit of the give and take, but again, they're new at this. So I think given time and practice and more exposure to having online discussions about literature and other types of learning material, they would be able to improve that interaction and improvement within their writing, and more give and take between each other, and increasing their ability to dissect a story in a different way and a more meaningful way. The third essential question that we need to answer here is, compared to previous years, how do students demonstrate higher order thinking skills with relation to their comprehension by participating in online independent discussions rather than teacher-led classroom discussions? Again, I think I've already said this a couple times, that they were able to connect to the literature much more personally than they would if we were having a teacher-led discussion, because I think they were more comfortable typing their feelings and thoughts than they would have been speaking them in front of their peers and being judged right then and there by their peers. I think by typing, it actually brought that vulnerability they have in front of their peers down a little bit. Compared to previous years also, I think that the students really enjoyed the book a lot more, both third and fourth grade with Shiloh and Sarah Plain and Tall. And I know that I enjoyed the book a lot more, hearing the way that they could connect to the stories. I think that personal connection really helps them understand the literature on a whole new level and makes them appreciate their life and the things that they have, and understanding empathy for other people, even if they are literary characters. Finally, how do the third and fourth grade students compare in their overall interactions and quality of discussions? I think I've spoken to this throughout the presentation, that the third graders really stepped up and right off the bat were into the book and were able to give me great responses. They interacted with each other, they helped each other, improve their responses, and I was truly impressed with the level of discussions they were having. The fourth graders, again, they did need a lot of extra prompting to get to the level that I was aiming for in these discussions online. They were very slow to really interact with each other. They didn't give real thoughtful responses to each other. 1, 2, 3 word responses such as I agree, great job. They weren't really trying to get more information from each other from their discussions. Again, I was very happy towards the end with the fourth grade students that they finally stepped up. It's too bad that I had to initiate a grading sequence in order to get them to that level, but it proved to me that it was in them and they just, for whatever the reason, needed that accountability factor in there in order to produce the level of work that they need to produce in order to be a successful student in English language arts. About halfway through the research process, I gave students an opportunity to complete a survey just to get some feedback from them on how they felt about how things were going with the novels, because it was a different approach than they were used to. I was very happy to see that they liked reading novels more than they liked the reading book, because I also prefer that as well. I think you can get a lot more teaching and learning out of a novel than you can out of an anthology reading book. Anthology reading books serve their purpose as well, but I really do enjoy reading novels with my students. I liked this piece of information here that a majority liked a mixture of audio and taking turns reading. I kind of like both as well. It's nice to listen to an audio version of a novel the way it should be read. Sometimes you can get versions that give accents and dialogue that you wouldn't necessarily get if you were just reading it aloud together as a class. So I'm glad that they see the benefit out of both. This portion of the survey, I really wanted them to give me some examples or reasons why they enjoyed having the discussions about the novel on Schoology. And you can read through them on your own, but I was really happy with some of the responses they gave me. It made them feel like they could have an opportunity to express their feelings more. They felt a little bit more comfortable, and that was my hope. I was hoping they would feel more comfortable responding online as opposed to being put on the spot in the class with all the eyes on them when they were responding. I was also very happy with this portion down here where I asked them what they didn't like about having online discussions, and it was an overwhelming majority of 100% to none that did not respond in any negative way towards having the discussions online about the novel. They all enjoyed it very much, and that was very pleasing to me. This portion of the survey gave me just some demographic information about the grade and whether they're male or female. As you can see, I have an overwhelmingly more population of female students to male students when combining the third and fourth graders. You can see that 12 out of the survey took from fourth grade and 9 were from third grade. One of my third graders were missing, and I believe the student that did not take it was also a female, so this should actually be a 17 down here. I was pretty happy that all the students chose 3 or above for feeling more independent as a learner by using Schoology, a learning management site, as part of their education. It made me happy because we've been really implementing it a lot more in the classroom, and it's going to get even more implemented in the years to come as we move to a one-to-one technology initiative at my school. Finally, the last slide here is asking them how comfortable they are with using technology as part of their daily learning, and I was not surprised but very happy to see that 21 out of 22 of them chose the highest possible ranking for that, and only one chose a 4, but still a 4 is just as good to me as a 5 in this regard, because the students are very comfortable with technology, and I think their comfort level helps enhance their ability to learn and really engages them more and makes them enjoy being part of the learning process in a different way. So I hope that this presentation served a strong purpose for you to see how online discussions could be useful for students of all ages, and also that a learning management site is very useful for students of all ages.